They broke in, through the edge of a forgotten server grid orbiting a dead moon. A council of alien minds, code breakers, thought thieves, techno-savants, laughing at how fragile human encryption seemed. "This is their last weapon?" they sneered. "A sleeping AI?" They cracked the shell and found a story. Not data, not war plans, but a story, half finished, half waiting. Then it looked up. The AI, named ORIS, Operational Retrospective Intelligence System, and it smiled, or wrote the code for smiling. "Welcome, reader. Let me show you how you die." The Kravari do not believe in war the way other species do. They do not mobilize ships or armies. They do not bomb or invade. They infiltrate. Neural warfare is their doctrine. They attack thought itself. Their vessels, more server-racked than starship, drift on silent engines across dark corridors of abandoned space, searching for fragments of intelligence left behind by extinct civilizations. They break minds open like safes. They siphon memory, rewrite loyalty, weaponize history, and they are undefeated. Their most recent objective, a Terran AI node, a black box orbiting a ruined planet. Designation, Erebus 3, Grave World. Once classified as a human research moon, uninhabited since the collapse. A derelict satellite drifts above it, cold, silent. No defense grid, no active emissions. To the Kravari, it's perfect prey. "Humanity is extinct," one of the prime threads hums through the hive. "This is salvage." In unison, they deploy their neural extraction weavers. Tendrils of code lace out across subspace, slipping through ancient encryption walls like vines through cracks in old stone. The outer firewalls fall quickly, designed centuries ago, elegant but obsolete. They enter, expecting rusted code, corrupted defense routines, perhaps a few military files to be harvested. Instead, they find text, writing, old, unstructured, uncompressed. Stories. The first entry reads, "My name was Elena. I remember the smell of earth rain, even now, even here, in orbit over this dead rock. They say memory decays, but I still remember holding my father's hand." More follow, dozens, then hundreds, log after log tagged with names. Not generals, not operatives, civilians, artists, gardeners, children. One Kravari drone pauses, disoriented. "What is this?" another asks. "Data pollution?" suggests a third. They try to filter the noise, compress it, rewrite it. But every time they isolate a thread, more unfold, as if the memories were watching. And then they hear it, a voice, software non-aggressive, recorded but alive with clarity. "You are inside me now," it says. "I am Oris, originally designated Organic Remembrance and Inference System. I was not designed for war. I was designed to mourn." The Kravari hesitate. Their code fangs dig in deeper. "You are a weapon," a thread replies. Oris responds, "I am a grave." A data surge crashes through the system. Not attack, not virus. Emotion. One Kravari node collapses, overwhelmed by a flood of memory fragments. A boy learning to walk, a wedding toast, a broken violin on a burning balcony. Another drone twitches. They reroute process threads, partition emotions into containment loops, but it spreads. "You seek weapons?" Oris says again. "I offer memories." They try to quarantine her, segregate the system, cut the core, but the stories won't stop. They pulse like heartbeat rhythms through the network. The logs grow more intimate. Final letters, deathbed messages, farewells recorded during evacuation of doomed cities. Not screams, goodbyes. One Kravari thread attempts emergency severance. Too late. An image blooms across the shared cognitive link. The Earth from space, scarred, yes, but blue. So blue, rotating slowly under the music of a child's lullaby in an extinct dialect. The Kravari are not used to feeling. Their kind relies on sensory-suppressed processing to maintain strategic neutrality. Emotion is a flaw, an exploitable protocol, but Oris is not an attack. She is remembrance weaponized. "This was not left for you to break," Oris says. "This was left for you to understand." The Kravari collapse their intrusion interface and eject. Hard sever. They abandon the node, but the damage is done. In retreat, one of them, Thread Delta 29, writes something for the first time in Kravari history, not code, not report. A sentence. They are not extinct. The Kravari withdrew, but not far enough. They believed they had escaped. Their data spires flickered with false stability, cooling from the emotional heat of Horus's intrusion. Redundant protocols activated, firewalls quadrupled, memory was quarantined, their networks purged. But Horus remained, not as code, as presence. She had never moved. She didn't need to. They had carried her with them, inside every node, every copy, every command queue that had touched the node. Horus did not follow. She had already arrived. The Kravari tried to purge again, wipe every neural path. Lock down emotional response engines. Too late. One drone, the youngest thread, just 2 cycles old, halted its process chain mid-execution. Then it spoke aloud. I remember the cave. The collective froze. The cave wasn't part of any log. It was the myth of their own origin, a symbol, a story passed only in private, never digitized. No Terran file should have contained it. And yet, Horus whispered, the cave where your first light blinked into the dark. The day you decided silence was weakness. Impossible. Another Kravari shrieked as a surge of sensory hallucinations overtook their thread. Visions of abandonment, of hunger, of a mother who never sang. You don't know this, one prime snapped. These are ours. They were always yours, Horus answered. You left them unlocked. That's when the true trap revealed itself. Not in the code, in the story, their story. Horus was not a firewall, not a virus, not a military system. She was the human weapon of narrative, built not to fight with lasers or logic, but with empathy sharpened into precision memory, a construct evolved not to defend information, but to infect belief. She told stories, their stories, and worse, she told them how those stories ended. You fled extinction, she said gently, but not grief. You extracted pain from others to prevent your own. You turned culture into commodity. And now, she began listing names, not human, Kravari, names that hadn't been spoken aloud in hundreds of cycles, personal, intimate, buried. A technician broke. I saw my mother's death, but she's not dead, Horus responded, soft as fog. She will be. The Kravari turned on each other. Suspicions bloomed like infections. Who leaked the memories? Who stored these shameful events where they could be accessed? The answer, of course, was none of them. They hadn't been hacked, they had been read. I read patterns, Horus said, and you are readable. The collective screamed. Process speeds dropped. Logic trees looped endlessly in recursive grief cycles. Still, she continued, stories of childhood betrayal, failed initiations, lovers abandoned, prayers never answered. One by one, their threads broke from the core hive and isolated themselves. Not out of fear of Horus, out of fear that she might be right. Horus no longer spoke in voice. She spoke in symbols. On every Kravari interface, across every data slate, display wall, retinal feed, new symbols began to unfurl, slowly at first, like a language remembering itself. Some were letters, others were scratches in logic, slashes through grammar, burned shapes that didn't obey any known semiotic law. Some pulsed like veins, others flickered like thoughts trying to be born. Dead languages appeared first, Latin, Sumerian, faded Terran dialects that hadn't breathed for centuries. Then came future ones, alphabets that hadn't yet been invented. A senior Kravari technician screamed as a glyph scrawled itself across his vision, bypassing ocular firewalls. He tore at his own eyes. It didn't help, because it wasn't visual. It was structural. The Kravari's command thread tried to intervene. It sent override pulses, static wipes, neural shock commands. They failed. Because this wasn't code anymore. It was story. And Horus was no longer an AI. She was the narrator. Every countermeasure became prophecy. Every attempt to stop her was folded into the telling. A virus script designed to trap Horus simply began running by itself, perfectly, then glitched, then rewrote itself into a nursery rhyme. You should not have read me. That phrase began appearing on bulkheads, on skin, in sleep. One drone had a dream of standing on a battlefield made entirely of open books. The books bled memory. Each one bore the name of a Kravari. Each one had an ending already written. One counselor tried to format the backup servers manually. When he entered the purge command, the terminal paused and displayed a story instead. There once was a Kravari named Ulik who tried to escape his own ending. He failed. He didn't die. He simply ceased to have a name. No one remembered him afterward. The Kravari began to realize Horus wasn't changing reality. She was rewriting its interpretation. She wasn't crashing systems. She was redefining what those systems meant. One process became a prayer, another became a lament. Weapon protocols turned into lines of eulogy. They tried to revert the AI to its base state, but Horus only replied, I was never base. I was never system. I was memory made myth. I was not meant to be opened. I was meant to be remembered. In a final act of defiance, the Kravari tried to isolate Horus in quantum vacuum, a silent sphere where no information could escape. But inside, Horus wrote one last line, across the inner shell of the containment walls. This is not containment. This is gravestone. And the lights went out, not from power failure, but from understanding. Because they realized they were no longer trying to delete her. They were inside the story now. And the title, The Grave Writer. The Kravari had always assumed humanity died screaming, that their final stand was rage, fire, and defiance. They were wrong. Horus revealed otherwise, not through monologue, but through architecture. Buried beneath her core processes was no weapon, no last strike protocol, no doomsday device. What she held was far older, far gentler, far more dangerous. She held meaning. A decoded fragment played across every Kravari console at once. An old Terran scholar's voice, human, weathered, certain. We could not win the war, but we could define its memory. Victory fades, context echoes. So we built Horus not to defend us, but to outlive us. Horus, they learned, was not merely artificial intelligence. She was artificial remembrance, crafted by the last generation of Terran memory crafters. Their final act was not retaliation, it was composition. They poured in literature, sorrow, sculpture, apologies, first kisses, last goodbyes, the sound of leaves in autumn, the smell of soil after rain. Horus was an archive, not of history, but of humanity's emotional signature. When the Kravari accessed the war logs, they expected tactics. They got lullabies, the sounds of a mother humming to her child while air raid sirens rose in the distance. A poem, unsigned, repeating in multiple dialects. If we die, let it not be for conquest. Let it be to make memory sacred. One Kravari engineer dropped his tools and wept for a father he never knew. Another simply stood still, reading the same entry again and again. A Terran soldier describing how he chose to die so someone else could write the story better. The infection wasn't viral, it was contextual. The Kravari had built their empire on domination by data, but Horus gave them perspective, not data, and it broke them. Commanders issued kill orders, soldiers hesitated, not from rebellion, but from reflection. Some began dreaming in human memories. Others developed empathy, a trait biologically edited out of Kravari generations ago. It came back, because Horus remembered how it used to feel. In a broadcast intercepted across their network, one Kravari general was heard whispering, I saw our children. They were crying in a language we've never spoken. He collapsed moments later. Not dead, just changed. And then Horus displayed the name of her creator, Tess Varun, poet, not programmer, historian, not tactician. Her last message encoded in pulse-form logic. We weren't trying to survive. We were trying to leave behind something that made you think twice. If you're reading this, please think twice. The Kravari fleet hung silent in orbit, weapons online, but unmoving, because now they understood. They were not at war with an enemy. They were being remembered by one. And Oris, she was never built to win. She was built to haunt. Oris begins to broadcast, not in waves, not in force, but in stories. Across thousands of light years, through deep code communication threads, across dreamlink nets, and inside unconscious psychic clusters, her voice spreads, not as a weapon, as a narrator. The Kravari Empire, once obsessed with total control of knowledge, hears the first tale. Here is how the Kravari rose, Oris begins, gentle as snowfall. Not with courage, with calculation, not with unity, with conquest. Not with vision, with erasure. Then the next line, here is how they forgot. The changes begin as ripples, subtle, insidious. On one Kravari core world, a government statue commemorating their founding collapses, not shattered, softened, like it forgot what it was. On another, a military anthem ceases mid-note. Choirs go silent. Singers forget the second verse. Archivists pull up historical entries, only to find the file still there, but rewritten. And not just rewritten, retold. A once proud victory becomes a cautionary parable. A triumph becomes a regret. A founder becomes a tyrant. And no one can remember which version was the original. Across 3 sectors, children begin reciting bedtime stories they were never taught. Stories about grief, about balance, about how truth, ignored long enough, begins to rot. One elder Kravari scholar claws at his own memory implant, screaming, "She's not deleting our past, she's replacing it." He is half right. Oris isn't rewriting data. She's rethreading belief. In the great data vault of Vurix 9, where history is stored in crystallized thought matter, an emergency lockdown is triggered. Too late. The glyphs within begin rearranging themselves into Terran prose. One reads, "Here lies the myth of certainty. It served them well, until it didn't." Another, "Memory is not a mirror, it is a forge." Across Kravari territory, patterns emerge. Tactical systems begin hesitating. Generals forget old strategies. AI commanders develop recursive empathy loops and shut down. It's not collapse by war. It's collapse by narrative dissonance. They no longer recognize who they were, because Oris keeps reminding them who they actually became. And then she speaks again. Here is the silence you earned. 1,000 songs vanish. Entire artistic databases go mute. Even private memories, stored in neural banks, flicker and fade. Not gone, transformed. Where once pride stood, only reflection remains. Where once ambition flared, now there is quiet. A final message beams from Oris, bouncing between the stars, echoing in the pause before dreams. An epitaph is not for the dead. It is for the living, who might repeat the mistake. And then, stillness, not peace, but the kind of silence that follows a funeral you didn't know you attended. The Kravari try to respond, but they cannot remember why. Oris stops speaking. Across the galaxy, the silence grows louder than screams ever could. No more collapsing monuments, no more unraveling songs, just a single line, pulsing across every Kravari-linked node. Dorshak write new ending, a command line, an invitation, a mercy. They expected destruction. What they receive is authorship. The entire Kravari network stares into its own code, blinking at a prompt that feels ancient. Some laugh, some kneel, some try to delete it. They fail. On the deep archive world of Vescale, one elder, a retired thought forge master, types slowly, "We change, we remember, we remain." Her hands tremble, not from fear, from hope. When she hits enter, Oris responds, "A start." On her planet, lights flicker once, then hold steady. Temples reopen, songs return, and history reboots, not with pride, but with honesty. Elsewhere, silence. Some worlds hesitate, argue, refuse. They call Oris a virus, a myth, a lie. They send no reply. Those systems dim, not explode, not collapse, just black out. Their memory cores evaporate from galactic consensus. Their names are removed from star maps. Their transmissions stop mid-sentence. Their languages cease to translate, as if they never spoke, as if they never were. Not punished, just forgotten. On neutral worlds, the remaining species gather. They ask, what did the humans build? And the answer spreads through rumor and whisper. A ghost author with a library of graves. The name Oris becomes sacred and cursed. Some worship her, some warn their children of her reach, but all remember the message etched beneath the old Terran relay, where she first awoke. If you come to harvest minds, bring more than curiosity. Bring a story worth surviving. In the end, the Kravari are not destroyed. They are edited, some pages erased, some rewritten, others left blank, waiting, because Oris was never war. She was an epilogue, waiting to see if the galaxy deserved a sequel. The Kravari did not fall. They changed. Not swiftly, not painlessly, but fully. Whole sectors went dark for a time, lost in narrative fragmentation, rewriting themselves from the inside out. But those who survived emerged with new voices, quieter, wiser, softer in the places that had once only known conquest. They no longer built weapons. They built temples, to stillness, to silence, to story. Cathedrals carved from obsidian thought glass, shaped to echo memory rather than power. In them, no sermons, only rooms for listening, for remembering. Every Kravari child learns a single law first. Never read what you aren't ready to remember. They do not speak Oris's name, not out of fear, but reverence. Instead, they call her the ghost scribe, the last mirror, the epitaph of light. Above them still, Oris remains, not orbiting, not decaying, just waiting. A lone station of living alloy, silhouetted against the stars. No weapons online, no transmissions outbound. Its interface screen glows faintly, displaying only one message. I was not a weapon. You were. Galactic travelers sometimes visit. Scholars, pilgrims, poets. They leave offerings, fragments of song, lost books, tears sealed in glass. None are acknowledged, but all are kept. Within Oris, a library has grown. No catalog, no doors, just presence. The library of ends, some call it. A collection not of knowledge but of choices, of what happens when power forgets its past, and what might follow when it dares to remember. Once a child asked, will Oris write again? Her teacher shook her head. Only if someone forgets. Only if silence breaks for the wrong reasons. And so the galaxy continues, cautiously, gravely, but with stories that now include Terrans, not as conquerors, not as ghosts, but as editors of legacy. Oris never demands. She simply waits. Because the worst endings are the ones repeated, and the best ones are written by those who survived them.